My new book, Facts That Aren't True, is out now. Don't forget about my other book, Rational Answers to Stupid Questions. Yep, we're gonna pick on Will Duffy again. No, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Duffy is just guilty of the same kind of logical bankruptcy and cheap rhetorical tricks that the flat earthers he's done a very good job of shooting down do. I don't think Duffy is stupid or anything like that. I really don't. It's just that he's got a very hardcore belief system, and his worldview necessitates that he works backwards from that conclusion in order to make the data plausible in light of the conclusion. This is the only option that young Earth creationists even have. We can see billions of light years. The rocks can be dated to billions of years old. Well, it was just made that way. There's no evidence. There's no science. There's no nothing. It's just, well, it could be, and for me, it has to be. The most important question, maybe to keep in mind, to present to people like this is, if the Bible didn't exist, how old would you think the Earth, the universe are? And how would you get there? There's no avenue that gets you to 6,000 years. So I'm going to play some of the clips of some of the talking points and data that Duffy uses and show you why it's wrong.
I can give you a firsthand example of this where the mainstream science community was unwilling to do actual science that I was involved in paying for. Now, this is big for me, and it's one of the reasons I'm young Earth. So let me tell everybody a story, which is incredibly fascinating. Mary Schweitzer and Jack Horner discovered a T-Rex fossil in Montana, and the leg bone was too big to get out, so they had to cut it in half. When they did that, they found inside of the T-Rex leg bone what looked like a biological material, but they didn't know what it was. Mary Schweitzer comes out and says, you guys, this is original biological material. This is not a fossil. This is not a rock. And the science community hung her. And
well, to be clear, 99.99% of it was fossilized. There just were some remnants of some biological material, and then after they hydrated that material, it had a little bit of flexibility to it.
And so I was part of a group. We offered Jack Horner and Mary Schweitzer $23,000 to do a carbon-14 test on the biological material. The call is recorded. This is all online. Jack Horner said no. And we said, Jack, why won't you want to do science? Because that's what you do with biological material, is you 14C test it. And he said, we don't want the young Earth creationists to run with this. So that right there is a perfect example, Tony, where the science community is unwilling to do actual real science.
Okay, so this sounds conspiratorial. It sounds like a cover-up, but it's not. Mary Schweitzer and Jack Horner know that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. So they are not having a crisis of faith or anything like that where they're just failing to deal with it. They just know that people will bastardize and use this to peddle something that isn't true. There's this old skit, I can't remember exactly where it's from, but this lady's talking to this guy, and she's claiming something, and the guy has a stack of papers that's like this tall, and he says, well, all of these studies say no, and then he has one piece of paper, and this one study says yes, and she snatches it from him and says, I thought so. Tony actually does a good job of explaining this in just a few moments here, but we have just an embarrassment of riches of evidence supporting millions and billions of years. Nobody thought that organic material could last for many tens of millions of years because it had never been found before. What's hilarious is creationists will say organic material, like the fossils can't be old because organic material can't last that long. According to them, the entire universe is less than 10,000 years old. So they don't know that. Now, Duffy's not really making that argument. He's talking about carbon-14. Date it. And if it really is so old, there shouldn't be any carbon-14 left. The problem is that no matter what you try to sample, you're going to get contamination of carbon-14 in it. There are labs that have taken chunks of metal and put them into I don't know if they're spectrophotometers or exactly what does the carbon-14 analysis, but it reads a little bit of carbon-14 in there no matter what. And a little bit is important because the way radioactive decay happens is you start with the entire sample, the parent material. In one half-life, half of it's gone, and then half of what's left, half of what's left. After only 10 generations, 10 half-lives, you have less than 1/10 of 1% of the original material. Go a few more half-lives after that, and we're basically at the level of the background radiation. So with regard to carbon-14, things just look indistinguishable virtually no matter how old they are because of that microscopic amount of contamination. It is not true that the presence of carbon-14 disproves millions or billions of years old. We have other dating techniques. We know the technological and practical limitations of carbon-14. We have other methods. Now, it's also hilarious and a contradiction for the young Earth creationists to say that, oh, carbon-14 works and is accurate. And so we're going to use this to prove that nothing can be as old as you say it is. But when we use other techniques and I've already laid out the logic and the science behind why carbon-14 has its limitations. But when we use other techniques, they say, no, that one doesn't count because God just made it look like it's old. See, every explanation necessarily contradicts all the other explanations, which is, again, exactly what happens with flat Earth. Why does the sun set? Because it gets too far away to see. What's farther away, the sun or the stars? The stars. But we can see the stars? Yeah, because the stars are really bright. What's brighter, the stars or the sun? The sun. Oh, but we can't see the sun at night, even though it's closer and brighter. It's unfortunate. I think we could get Duffy on our side, though.
There's something that was discovered in Australia. It was some sort of petrified wood. And it was both carbon-14 dated and potassium-argon dated. And the difference in the dates was wildly different. That's one example. A second example is things are dated like lava that we know when it was formed.
Okay, well, I'll get to that part in a second. But yes, Duffy, if you carbon-14 date something, carbon-14 has a half-life of it's less than 5,800 years. Potassium-argon dating, potassium-40 has a half-life of 1.25 billion years, I believe. Let me fact check myself. Yes, 1.25 billion years. So when you use these two different techniques to date something, of course you're going to get wildly different answers. Let's say you have a meter stick, but it has no markings on it. And then you need to try to measure the length of this pencil or the width of this pencil. You're going to have to make an estimation. Now, let's say then you get a caliper, like an extremely precise machined caliper that will measure the width of this pencil as well. You're going to get I don't know about radically, but you're going to get significantly different measurements from that. Now, the reasons aren't the same, but the point is when you're using the wrong measuring tool for something, you should expect that it's not going to give good results. Again, there are limitations to the carbon-14 dating. After 10 half-lives, that you have, like I said, less than 0.1% of the material. But, it's not going to run out of atoms anytime soon. This half of a half of a half of a half of a half, even a microscopic sample has, quintillions of atoms in it? It's an absurd number. We can go on forever until there's only this much of the original material or only this much of the original material. But you take that number times a quadrillion and you still have a sizable number of atoms left. But we can't, but again, that's indistinguishable from the background. I always call it background radiation, which is a bad thing to call it, but the contamination. Whereas with potassium, because the half-life is over 1 billion years, well, the sample can be many millions of years old, but we haven't even used anywhere close to half the atoms yet. So we can accurately use that for things that are millions of years old. With the carbon-14, we can't.
Formed, or rock that was formed in Mount St. Helens explosion, and the dates are wrong, but we actually saw those form. So,
okay, and here's the other thing he's saying, and maybe you sort of forgot exactly what he's talking about, but he's saying we take Mount St. Helens, we know when that erupted, and then they tried to do potassium argon dating or whatever for the volcanic rock that came out of there, and it's wrong. Now, I don't know if he is specifically talking about potassium argon dating with respect to Mount St. Helens, but again, the half-life for potassium argon is over 1 billion years, right? So let's say any scientific measurement you make is going to have error bars, right? Now, let's say that the error range for potassium argon is 0.0001. I don't think it is that precise, but this actually makes my case more strongly. Let's say that it's 0.0001% error. Well, if we take that, actually technically that would be an error of 0.01%. But even if that's the case, we still get a range of our plus minus here. You take a measurement, so it's this plus minus, but it could be within the range of 125,000 years. Again, that is with an accuracy of 99.9%. Once again, the problem is it's like you're trying to use a meter stick with no markings on it to measure the width of a hair. It's not the right tool for that. If we were measuring something appropriate, like the width of the United States with meter sticks that have no markings on them, well, we're going to have to estimate the final meter of that, but all the other ones that come before that are going to be accurate. Now, however, we have used not just carbon, but other radiometric dating techniques, to date things of known archaeological history, like Vesuvius, Vesuvius is the volcano. Pompeii has been dated to within just a couple of years of the event, and we know that it happened in 79. So what's really going on here is we're just very much cherry-picking data.
it sounded like begging the question to me. And you said that dating method doesn't work on something. What was the exact phrase you used?
Radiocarbon dating.
Well, I just heard something you said that sounded like begging the question to me. And you said that dating method doesn't work on something. What was the exact phrase you used?
So radiocarbon dating doesn't work on very old material.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about that, because I have an issue with that statement. Okay. And it gets back to my example with Jack Horner.
Okay, so I'll tell you what his argument is. He's accusing the scientists of engaging in circular reasoning by simply he's saying, well, your claim is it is old, so we can't carbon date it. That's just circular reasoning. Why not carbon date it? Because if you carbon date it, then it'll look old, right? A similar accusation of circular reasoning that young Earth creationists use is they say that scientists or rock layers, strata layers, are dated according to the fossils they have in them, but the fossils are dated according to what stratigraphical, I'm having a stroke, stratigraphical layer they are found in, therefore it's all circular reasoning. What that and what Duffy is saying here, what those don't take into account is yes, we do say that with respect to the fossils and the layers, but that is because it is the year 2025 and we have spent countless thousands and millions of hours scientifically verifying and building the model that we have for these things. And then with respect to the carbon dating, it's been tested and verified, and its limitations are known because of a rigorous body of scientific work that's gone into it. It's not circular reasoning. We're just leaving out the story behind how we know what we know. We know how old dinosaur bones are because of different techniques, not carbon dating. We know the limits of carbon dating because of all the countless studies that have been done with carbon dating and how its limitations have been verified by other more appropriate techniques showing that, yeah, these carbon numbers are giving the wrong results. But this, look, here's an important thing, and I repeat this quite often. If the science that us secularists are really trying to sell you is broken, if it's built on a foundation of sand, then its data can't be consistent and it can't correlate with other things. That's too much of a coincidence to allow for. You can take the claim that the carbon-14 dating doesn't work for this and just say, well, that's a claim, but we have outside studies that demonstrate its limitations, and those outside demonstrations, there are multiple of them, they all converge and behave well together, and they all consistently point out the limitations of carbon-14. So carbon-14 has limits isn't just a claim. We have claims, we have the evidence, and we have the reasoning. Tony actually does a really brilliant job of showing this here. All of these different data lines, these are actually completely different studies, but they're all telling you exactly the same thing. A coincidence is not an acceptable explanation for this. Okay, here's the next thing.
Fortunately, people were able to do real actual science, and there's now been not only carbon-14 but DNA inside of these dinosaur bones. So
I just want to make a quick comment on this. I looked up this thing about finding DNA in dinosaur bones, and because we watched this on a live stream the other day, and I couldn't find any. I found a bunch of sources from 2020, 2021 that said that they may have found some like fragmentary pieces of nucleic acids in dinosaur bones, but there were zero more recent articles or updates on this. So I don't know if this is actually confirmed. But again, if we find some microscopic remnants of nucleotides, that's going to be cool, but it's going to have nothing. It's going to have nothing on the geological data, the astronomical data, and the physics that tells us that Earth is very old. Now, that's not the main thing. Let me keep going here for a second.
this is very significant to the age of the Earth.
Okay.
Well, actually, I guess he was done there. So here is Duffy pretending like they're doing the real science, because he said that earlier. When we were able to do some real science or whatever, this is like when the flat earthers prove the shape of the Earth with a Nikon P900. Now, without really playing what Tony is going to say here, let me just show. Just look at the slideshow that he has. He's the science that he's describing here is extremely sophisticated. It's hard to understand. There's a lot of it that I don't understand. But the idea that we, by carbon-14 dating these bones, and even carbon-14 is highly technical, but the idea that they're sitting here pretending, or for Duffy to claim, well, we're going to do the real science proves the age of the Earth. They don't have any kind of modeling or technology or abilities to do anything like the extremely sophisticated science, although this looks a little less sophisticated at this point. But the deep level of understanding, the technological know-how, and just the insane level of engineering and expertise and know-how and rigor that goes into what we know is sold short by the flat earthers because they have to try to rely on simplistic things and cheap tricks to say that they know or proved that the Earth is flat. And for the young Earth creationist, it's the same thing. And every single time that it goes to a level beyond like high school or whatever, they just come up with excuses like, well, God did it that way because he did it that way because.
I want you to tell me right now, other than meteorites that did not originate from the Earth, what shows us the Earth is 4.5 billion years old?
So the hypothesis is that the nebular hypothesis was that meteorites formed the Earth. So the age of the meteorites is, and the fact that it's consistent, it's extremely consistent actually. Duffy brought up Snell earlier. Snell has this website where he's compiled the ages of like literally thousands of meteorites. And yeah, the average age of them is right there at 4.5 billion years old. And by the way, thanks to, for example, the Hubble Space Telescope, we have tons of images of protoplanetary disks forming around stars. So that nebular hypothesis is much older than the data that confirms it. So we're not working backwards. But he asked for other than meteorites, and well, here we go.
Okay. So material on Earth has been dated to that far back.
No, that's false, Tony. I'm sorry. I have to stop you. Nothing from the Earth has been dated at 4.5 billion years old. Nothing.
Yes, because it has to. Now you are.
Okay, so Tony absolutely erupts at him on here, and he says you're engaging in
actually using science denialist tactics.
Right there. We have dated rocks on the Earth up to, like with zircon crystals, which aren't rocks, but they're minerals embedded within the rocks. The zircon crystals have been dated to 4.2 billion years old. Again, all the data we have is consistent with the idea. And we can even, again, we can expand this out to multiple layers. If the secular account of the history of the Earth is true, then at all these different levels, these things have to remain consistent. The Earth cannot be older or as old as the universe, and it isn't. The materials on Earth cannot be older than the Earth, and they are not. And with we don't really get into the stratigraphical layers here, but those, if what we think is true about the sequencing of them and its layers accumulating slowly over vast stretches of time, then we have to have consistency in those layers, and we do. Like with the fossil record, any of this could have been disproven. If we have a layer up here that is vastly, would that be older than a layer down here, and then a layer that's vastly younger down here, that would completely destroy the paradigm. But it's never been found. We do this, we look for it constantly, and all it ever does is confirm what we thought. And you can look at the tectonic, the age of oceanic crust going outward from mid-ocean ridges. That shows a perfect pattern of progressively getting older and older as well.
Fields of science date the Earth to the same age. That is false. The 4.5.
No, that's not false.
Okay, where does 4.5 billion years come from? That exact number, where does that come from?
It comes from the position of well, there are multiple data sets. The position of the sun on the main sequence of the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram dates the sun's age since its formation. We can look at the
sorry, Tony, we're talking about the age of the Earth. Sorry, the sun is not the age of the Earth.
Oh man. So the way that he just unironically did the whole, you can't look at Duffy, didn't you just go to Antarctica to look at the sun to prove the shape of the Earth? And don't flat earthers tell you you can't look at the sky to prove the shape of the ground? You're doing the same thing. Now you could argue that the thing about the sun or whatever doesn't logically prove it like a deductive argument does, but in science is inductive. We look for evidence consistent with the idea. And the sun thing, you could say it confirms it, but if you want to be nitpicky and not give Duffy the chance to have that shit-eating grin on his face, then we can say it failed to falsify it. It's easily falsifiable. Age of the Earth stuff, easily falsifiable. But it's never been done.
People are going to interpret things differently, and you have to try to figure out whose interpretation is right. Maybe both of them are wrong, right? For example, if you've got a polystrate fossil, one person might say, well, I think that was there, and those layers developed over a long period of time. And the other side is going to say, no, I think that happened rapidly because it's going through so many layers.
Duffy, if the Earth is billions of years old, then can't things happen rapidly? during the course of those billions of years? Yes, but you're trying to sell us that every polystrate fossil formed that way. In places like, I think it's called Joggins Cliff in Nova Scotia, you find all these multiple polystrate fossils, trees buried in multiple sediments, but they extend over, the cliff is like thousands of feet tall, and you find the polystrate fossils at every level there. The idea that that happened rapidly with one flood is really not tenable. Gradually, all those layers forming, and gradually over vast stretches of time, polystrate fossils forming within it is much more consistent.
Is there a such thing as like a double-blind test in terms of dating something?
Yes, Duffy, it's called science. The reason we have double-blind or the randomized, double-blind, clinically controlled study is because at every single level of analysis, there's a human being involved. A human being is getting the drug, a human being developed the drug, a human being is administering the drug, and a human being is analyzing the data. With radiocarbon dating, a human being, a human being built the machines and is making the measurements, but that's really where the human error stops. Now, I would argue this actually isn't that bad of a question. I actually think it's kind of a good question, but I think that's because the explanation isn't obvious, and I think the explanation renders it kind of not like a pointless question, but it's not the gotcha that you think it is. Because when multiple different labs conduct the same study on the same material, and especially when there is actually a double-blind aspect to this, because, and Tony describes this here, people are sent samples to multiple different labs and they're not told like what it is or how old it, well, they might be told what it is, but they're not told how old it is, and they all get the same data. That fulfills the spirit of the double-blind study. It's kind of unfortunate. Duffy is very dogmatic with respect to this, but I don't know. Maybe he'll come around to it, or maybe he'll just become hyper agnostic to the idea. See you tomorrow.